So it was already mentioned that the meeting will be streamed on YouTube as well. So of course, those who want to participate in an interactive way, they are welcome here, and there might be also additional viewers on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this WWEA webinar, which is taking place as part of our series of webinars. And this time we have a number of webinars about the current status of wind power around the world. We have called it half-year review. And unlike the one we had half a year ago, this webinar will only be now focusing on the Eastern Hemisphere, which means Asian countries and Australia. The reason is that we had too many speakers to have the whole world in one, and we will have another webinar in the coming week with Europe, the MENA region, and also Africa. Now, again, it's my pleasure to welcome you. Great pleasure, and I'd like to say thank you to our speakers. We will have first-hand information. We have excellent experts from several markets in Asia and also Australia. Great thank you to also our partners, to the organizations which are behind those speakers. Thank you to Profec Ventus, the partner of this webinar series, which is supporting us. Then I'd like to mention that some technical announcements, that the webinar is, of course, a public event. We have not only the people participating here, but there's also a live stream broadcast on YouTube. So there will be more people watching there. And we are recording the webinar, and later all the speeches will be published. So whatever somebody says, please be aware. It's public and everybody in principle might have access to this information. I would also like to give you some technical information. As usual, we ask everyone to stay muted unless you are a speaker. Then we unmute you. Also, in case we have time for questions and answers, then we may call you and ask you to raise your voice. In general, we have, of course, the chat function here. So if you have questions to a particular speaker, please write your question here, and we try to address the question by asking the speaker to answer the question. Yeah, I think that is the introduction. And with this, I would like to hand over to our president, Peter Ray, who is the president of the World Wind Energy Association. As we're all now at home, Peter, I suppose you are joining us from Australia, from Tasmania, from your home in Launceston. Peter, if I may ask you to welcome our speakers and the audience. Peter, I'm not sure whether you seem to be still muted, but there is another Peter Ray, which now makes it a bit, I can see one Peter Ray, but our president, Peter, I cannot see you, so maybe you can switch on your camera. I cannot hear anything. If Sean, if you could please help me.
It seems like he is there, but he's not able to put the microphone.
Okay, well, we heard him a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah. So I don't know if he's having issues now, but I cannot see.
Okay, in that case, I'd suggest, well, we have now Peter as a co-host. Peter Ray from Tasmania, can you hear us? If not, I would suggest that we go ahead with the next speaker, with the first speaker of our webinar. Another speaker from Australia. It's my great pleasure to welcome Andrew Brave from the Australian Wind Alliance. Andrew, great pleasure, and thank you for joining us, for you at a rather late point of time of the day. and we look forward to hearing from you about the latest developments in Australia.
Hello, Stefan. Vielen Dank. So I'm calling in from New South Wales, actually. So,
Excellent.
so I'll share my screen so you can see what I have here. You can see that okay?
Yes, excellent. Thank you.
Great. So yes, hello everybody, and thanks very much for joining in on this webinar and for being interested in how wind energy is progressing here in Australia. So yeah, I just have a short 10 to 15 minute presentation. Hopefully I'll get through it quickly, and if there are any questions that people have, I'm very happy to take those. So firstly, just a word or two about the Australian Wind Alliance. We're a community advocacy group for wind, so we're not an industry peak organisation in that sense. We work in regional Australia where the wind farms are, and our brief is really around building support for wind energy in the regions. That may not be such an obvious thing to many of you from different countries, but here in Australia, the history of wind energy has been a little bit fraught, and there has been opposition at different times. So part of our role is really to work with local communities to try and make sure that wind is done in a way that works best for those communities. So we're around 7 years old. As I mentioned, most of our work is in regional Australia, but also we do work with industry on issues around community engagement and financial benefit sharing, which I think is reasonably well developed now in Australia. The sense that the financial benefits of a project need to spread beyond just the landholders to the broader community. But one thing. In fact, we're quite happy with where wind energy has gotten to in that sense, and going forward, as I'll sort of return to later in the presentation, a lot of the renewable energy development and wind energy development in Australia will be in renewable energy zones, which will be a mix of wind, solar, storage, so batteries and pumped hydro, and areas around the country where those ones will be. And so we're quite keen to keep doing that work around the social license of renewable energy, but alongside those different technologies. And therefore, we're in the process of rebranding ourselves as Realliance, Renewable Energy Alliance, if you like. As Peter Ray has, and I assume he's here on the call, has pointed out to me, there's potentially we slightly bump into the REN Alliance, but my understanding is the REN Alliance is very much an international organisation, whereas we will be sticking very much within the Australian borders. So to go on to where Australian wind energy is in Australia, we have around about 8,000 megawatts of wind installed here in Australia, and probably about 2,000 of that has been installed in the last 12 to 18 months. So we've been in the middle of a real boom of new construction, which is largely driven by the end of the renewable energy target federal policy that we had here. And that renewable energy target was designed to get us to 20% renewables by 2020. It was set up back in 2001, I think it was, and then increased in its ambition in 2009. And as we'll see in a second, we're now very much probably around 25% renewable energy. And of that, wind has about 15% of the installed capacity and produces about 9.3% of total demand. So the rest of that 25% is made up from solar, largely rooftop solar, some large-scale solar, and some hydro. So in Australia, as many of you will know, we have these icons on the right-hand side here are the various wind farms across the eastern side of the country. The western side also has electricity. I think that's worth pointing out. But what they call the national electricity market only extends to the eastern side of the country. So that's mostly what I'll talk about in the next few slides. But as you can see, there's quite a large cluster here in South Australia. Again, another large cluster here in Western Victoria. And these use the winds, very strong winds that we have coming up from, essentially Antarctica up through the Great Australian Bight here. Tasmania, we have a couple of new wind farms here, which have just gone in the last 12 months. New South Wales, this is where I am, a bit of a line there, and there's a great dividing range sort of goes up this part of the country. And we're also now starting to see wind farms go into Queensland, which is this state up here. And that's been relatively recent as Queensland has lower winds than this area down here. But the new larger wind turbines are able to handle those conditions. We have, I think there's probably over 100 wind farms, separate wind farms in Australia now. And here, I want to show you a chart. We have an excellent piece of software which is widely available here in Australia for free, called OpenNEM. And it's essentially a window into the national electricity market. And it's got some marvelous information, really easy to use. If you're ever interested in seeing Australian energy market statistics, it's opennem.org.au. So it's easy to find and quite easy to read. So what we're looking at here is a period of 3 days at the end of last week. And so here we're in spring, of course, which is a very good time for renewables. We get a lot of wind in spring, and also solar is quite good as well. We haven't moved into the hottest part of the year, so the efficiency for solar production is quite good. And so what we're seeing here is that renewables are actually supplying 33% of the total demand, and wind is supplying 15%. So as I mentioned before, across a year, wind is producing 9% or a bit above of the total demand. But in this particular 3-day period, wind, which is the green part here, was supplying 15%. The yellow parts here are solar, rooftop and large-scale solar. And as you can see, they're taking out very large chunks of supplying very large chunks of the demand during that daylight period. And the other notable thing that we're seeing here is gas, this is the orange one, produces very little. I think gas in total is producing around about the same amount as wind energy, so not very much. And as you can see, it's a bit of a sliver here. But the main thing that's interesting here is that this is our coal, both black and brown coal production we have in the bottom. And as you can see, in the middle of the day, the coal is ramping down quite a lot. So from 16,000 megawatts right down to 10,000 megawatts. And in fact, this one's even lower. We're now getting to the stage where our overall minimum demand we're hitting new records like almost every day at the moment, because we've had a lot of new wind and a lot of new solar coming on the last 12 months. So the minimum demand, as in front of the meter demand, is sort of dropping and dropping because of that solar chunk that's coming out. And so that's making life kind of challenging for the market operator, but it's very interesting, and renewables are producing a huge amount of the electricity in the country. And I'll just show another one of these ones just to point to this moment, which I think was last Sunday. So just a few days ago. And on a Sunday, for almost the first time, renewables were producing over 50%. So it's instantaneous production. Renewables were producing 50% of the electricity in the market, and wind was about 10. So we really are pushing on quite a bit at the moment in terms of renewable penetration. Now I won't talk too much about this one because it's a bit of a graph of spaghetti, but essentially this is showing. This is in South Australia. So in South Australia, there's wind is producing 40%, over 40% of all the energy in South Australia is coming from wind, and this is a map of the production of wind in a particularly high sort of wind time. So at times they're actually producing over 100% of their energy needs from wind and exporting to other states. And as you can kind of see here, many of these wind farms are having to ramp up and down and up and down, and they're being curtailed quite hard and quite regularly just to manage the levels of variable renewable penetration that we have. So so that is something that's causing some challenges, but I really think of those things as teething problems that we're making our way through. Before I finish up, I'll just mention a couple of challenges going forward. While we have had a very large build out of wind in the last year or two, we really have now hit the point where the grid is the main bottleneck holding us back. The market operator is taking a very long time to connect new projects into the grid because they need to manage stability, and so that's proving a bit of a headache. And there's been a bit of extra curtailment of new generators that was unforeseen. So that's causing a problem from a sort of project finance point of view. Lack of support from the federal government is a challenge in that we have our federal government, I'm afraid, is really not at all committed to climate action or proper renewables. They, for political reasons, would like to pretend they don't need to. But to be honest, they're becoming increasingly irrelevant because the price advantages of renewables are just so irresistible now. So going forward, as I mentioned before, new wind development will be happening in renewable energy zones, which I'll show in a second. The state governments are stepping up more and more. In Conservative and Labor state governments are both stepping up. They're both very interested in building new renewables and new grid capacity. And offshore wind, we really, because our onshore wind resources are so good and we have so much land, that's been the main focus. But we do have a couple of offshore projects starting to get going. But again, we're waiting on the federal government for even just a regulatory framework to build an offshore wind farm. So the federal government can still get in the way if they choose to. So looking forward, this is again the eastern seaboard of the country. And as you can see, there's a group of these, there's around 35 renewable energy zones up and down, essentially where the population is. Some of them are wind focused, some more solar focused, other ones, there's hydro all through this sort of section. And so what we're essentially going to be seeing is, so for instance, in this renewable energy zone here, a mix of new wind and solar with extra transmission being built to connect that. So that's really the way we'll be moving in the future here. So I think that's all I have to show. So if there's time for questions, good and well. Otherwise, I'll be interested to hear what other people have to say.
Thanks a lot, Andrew, indeed. And that was a very good overview. And it's quite impressive to see. I think Australia is getting more and more the good example for what you can do, although you have a government that may not be really supportive. I think that's in particular from a European perspective, something that people start to admire, how people are just doing it. But one question I'd have, how do you see now with the situation, the COVID-19 situation, is it rather good for developing these domestic sources? What's the short-term impact? Is that already something that you can even maybe quantify?
Look, to be honest, because it's interesting that the coincidence of the COVID outbreak this year, and it sort of coincided with the end of the renewable energy target sort of investment boom. So while there are still, at least a dozen wind farms in construction, and largely construction projects have been able to carry on, they've had to put in place restrictions around, practices, workplace practices around, hand washing and hygiene and what have you. But they've been allowed to keep building, so it hasn't really affected those. And because actually at the moment, the grid constraints are really the things holding back new projects. But also there's a sense that the industry really did go really hard for 2 or 3 years, a lot of new investment, a lot of new construction. And there's a bit of a sense that we're taking a breath for a year or two, the market operators sorting out the grid issues. And that's kind of coincided with the COVID stuff. So I think if anything, there's a bit of a slowdown in the new financial close, new projects getting to financial for a few months, which sort of put things out of kilter a bit because we're importing all of our equipment. But in general, I don't think it's really had a huge effect. There's still huge, like 1 or 2 of those renewable zones have gone out for an expression of interest to see, like there was one 3,000 megawatt, one where the state government said, we're putting out expression of interest for 3,000 megawatts, and they received applications for 27,000. So they were oversubscribed 9 times. So there's a lot of interest in the market still. And I don't see that COVID is really getting in the way of that.
Okay, well, that is, I think, is a good, interesting statement that you're making here. And I'm, of course, interested to hear also from our other colleagues speaking here. So again, thank you, Andrew. That was very good, sharing this information. And congratulations for bringing renewables together under one umbrella. That's certainly something that we should absolutely welcome. And whether we find whether there's some confusion with the REN Alliance, I think that's a minor issue indeed. Congratulations and good success with what you're doing in Australia.
Thank you, Stefan.
In case, I think we have, maybe a brief answer. There's one question now from Power China, Chubo. How about the hybrid projects, renewable and battery trend over there? How does it improve the whole system? If you could briefly answer to that. Of course, I know that Australia has experience.
Yeah, look, batteries are now something which we've started with, but it's really early days. There are 1 or 2 projects where batteries have been installed with wind farms, generally as after the wind farm was installed, the battery was done later. Most development applications are going in for wind farms are now going in with batteries, with expecting batteries will be part of it. I mean, I think the batteries you'll see happening is like we also have battery installations here which are just as part of the network. So there'll be a battery at one of the network nodes rather than at one of the generators. And so in that sense, I think companies are really still working out how batteries are best going to be used. Sometimes it'll be for system services and FCAS services. The arbitrage part of it is a little more challenging from a price and regulatory point of view, but but nevertheless, I think there's a lot of interest, and we'll see a lot of them coming on soon.
We heard a lot about the Tesla battery, of course, in South Australia.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's all the Elon Musk factor, that one. But
Indeed.
nevertheless, it's been very successful. Yeah.
His personal presence helps just by itself. Okay, again, thank you very much, Andrew. And then let's see, I see Peter Ray is now here. One, obviously, with two Peter Ray here, but one Peter Ray, the president of Offshore Wind Energy Association. Peter, can you now hear us and speak to us with just welcoming the participants?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank goodness. I don't know what was happening earlier, but that wasn't me. It was a person I know quite well, but I think he's tuned in with the connection that I'd given to him, and so he was appearing rather than me. But I'd like to welcome everybody. I'm sorry that I wasn't hooked in earlier, but was trying. I think this is a very important part of the work which WWA can do to bring to everybody a summary of where we're going in the world with wind energy and the other renewables which inevitably become connected. In Australia, I was pleased to hear what Andrew was able to talk about. And the one thing that perhaps he didn't mention when right at the last talking about batteries, there is a strong movement towards pumped hydro, and the Snowy Mountain scheme is already being worked on to convert the capacity there for pumped hydro. Tasmania has a very high percentage of renewables, about 97%, and it has a very strong hydro element as well as wind, and it is planned to take the energy from Tasmania to meet it with the grid system in Victoria to provide backup to wind and solar in that area. So that's just a little bit more about what's happening in Australia, but I thank Andrew for what he was able to provide. I look forward to hearing the other speakers, and I again apologise for the problems at the beginning. Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody who's listening as well as our speakers. Thank you, Stefan.
Thanks so much, Peter. Now let's move a little bit north, seen from Australia. Now going to Korea, Republic of Korea, South Korea. I'm very pleased that we have, actually we have several people, colleagues here from Korea, but we have one representative of the Korean Wind Energy Industry Association, Mr. Chae Dok-wan, who is joining us, I suppose, from Seoul. And yeah, I have the pleasure now inviting you to speak and presenting us latest developments of the Korean wind market.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me well?
Yes, that sounds good.
All right. Who's handling over my presentation?
Would you like to share your screen, or would you like us to do that?
Okay.
You know, you can share the screen just by pressing the button share screen and choosing the right window. Otherwise, Sean, if you have the backup, we can do that as well. Yeah, let me also welcome in the meantime Professor Son Chung-gyu from Korea, who is our board member representing Korea. Pleasure to have you here as well. And now let's hear what the Korean Wind Energy Industry Association has to say. Which I think that looks good. Yes, perfect. Please go ahead.
You can use your own keyboard to change the slides. Or you just tell me next, and I will just do it for you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry.
We can already see your first slide and the second.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay.
My presentation is very short. I can speak English very well. I will read the script. Very sorry. Hello, this is the Chuichi, team leader of Korea Wind Energy Industry Association. I mainly talk with the government, the National Assembly, local government, and corporations about policy and institutions. Our association belongs to all companies related to the wind power industry, such as power generation company, developer, manufacturing, maintenance company, and certification company. And it is striving to develop the wind power industry in Korea. Okay. Okay. Yeah. As of 2019, the cumulative installed amount of wind power in Korea is about 1.5 gigawatt. An increase of 14.7% compared to 28. The amount of new installation was about 191 megawatt, an increase of 18.4% compared to 2018. Reasonable 경상북도, 전라북도, 강원도, and Jeju. Jeju account for 27.4% and 22.1%, 90%, and 19.90% respectively. The developer have obtained one electric business license about 12 gigawatt, including onshore and offshore wind power generation. It is still on early market. Okay. Why this? Okay. It's small problem. Why this? My presentation is has a small problem. Sorry.
Is there any way we can support that, or what can we do?
Thank you. Start the presentation. Change this presentation. I'm not control this presentation.
Yeah, if it's better, maybe I can. You just tell me next, and I will change the slide as you wish.
Okay.
Just a second, please. Then.
Please return the first page.
Yeah, one moment.
Yeah, thank you.
So this, yeah, you can tell me next when you want to change.
Okay. Next slide. Okay, the next slide. One more next slide. Okay. Onshore wind power was mainly installed in Western mountain region such as Gangwon-do, and Gyeongsang-buk-do. Offshore wind power is installed mainly in the southern region and the Jeju region. This region is widely onshore wind valley. This. Okay. By the end of 2019, offshore wind 1990 wind farm with 1.4 gigawatt has been grid connected, and 3 demonstration sites with 8 megawatt and 2 commercial offshore wind farm with 64.5 megawatt are in operation southwest onshore demonstration offshore wind farm 60 megawatt have been grid connected in year over this year, and many other offshore projects more than 3.1 gigawatt on the way. Okay, all right. Korea must utilize the sea that surround the 3 sides of the country due to its local location condition in order to lead to wind power as well as onshore wind power. In response, in July, the Korean government announced a plan to develop offshore wind power. The work with residents and coexist with the Finnish industry. Through this, the company is expressed in ambition to leap into the world top 5 offshore wind power by completing 12 gigawatt offshore wind power by 2030. Especially the Korean government is planning to promote a large-scale offshore wind farm, 5 complex that are visually on the map. Additional installations of 0.6 gigawatts will be installed in Incheon-si, 2.4 gigawatt in Jeonbuk, this valley. 8.2 gigawatt in Sinan, okay, and Jeolna, Namdo, and 0.0 gigawatt in Jeju. Yes, 0.0 gigawatt Jeju. Yes. In Ulsan, global companies such as GIG, COP, OW, Equinor, Shell, and Total preparing to develop 60 gigawatt floating offshore wind power. 5 projects are expected to be developed in earnest from 2023. Okay, next slide. The wind system supply are 9 companies in the past, mainly large ship building and heavy industry company. Now, only 3 companies, including Doosan Heavy Industry, Unison, and the Hanjin Industry, are operating. It mainly owns 3 megawatt onshore wind power and offshore wind power turbine. These 2 companies are developing on 8 megawatt wind turbine. Okay, next slide. Okay, in Korea, steel products such as tower and main shaft are mainly competitive. Part companies such as Dongguk SNC, CS Wind, Taewoong, and Silla Precision are already exporting to many countries. The Korean government and the local government are very interested in expanding the domestic market and growing these companies. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Thank you for listening to the presentation so far. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think it was very good to see the status of the Korean wind industry, and we see that there is a strong focus on offshore wind still in Korea. I would just wanted to ask you, do you see any short-term impact of the COVID-19 situation? Of course, we know Korea, together with Australia, are some of those few countries which have been able to manage well the COVID situation. But is there an impact on installations this year?
I think this year, I wonder Korean market is already early market. Not easy this year.
Good. Let's see, and then we will see. If I also may ask Professor Son, who is also here with us from Korea, what are your insights into the market? Can we?
Hello.
I think we must. Yes, now please.
Okay. It's I think it's Korea market is if you heard about this government policy in this year, so we think it's especially it's offshore in market in Korea is more emotional, and then otherwise it's I think it's Mr. Che also he knows about that. I think 2 days ago there are some announcements from our government side, the local government side. That means it's 22 offshore wind farm project is get some admission. There's 17 of Jeollanam province, 17 project of Jeollanam province. The other 5 project is east side, seaside. So we don't know correctly if this 22 project successfully continue to, then it's a very exciting news. So we hope also not only this year, but also it's next year, maybe it's the Korean market for offshore wind energy is slowly grow up, and then it's we have some government support to preparing the offshore wind energy market. That's all.
That sounds like really good news. And let me just ask you, maybe whoever wants from both of you answer this. How about implementation of large turbines in Korea, like 10 megawatt or above?
Oh, yes. Unison and Tucson, they tried to develop 8 megawatt and 10 megawatt wind turbine. But it's, I think it's, they take time, maybe next year or after 2 years, then should be it's 10 megawatt wind turbine developed.
That sounds also ambitious to have that in 1 or 2 years, but I think it's great to see we have such still ambitious plans, and we know, of course, that things have already started changing in Korea. So thank you very much to both of you, to Mr. Che, to Professor Son, also for staying with us. That's for all colleagues in the evening of your time. Thank you. And then we would go not far from Korea to Japan. where I welcome now Professor Chuichi Arakawa, who is used to be professor at the University of Tokyo. So very knowledgeable, one of the first experts of wind power in Japan, and looking forward to now hearing from you about the latest developments in Japan. Chuichi.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. It's my pleasure, great pleasure to come back to this webinar to introduce our status of wind power in Japan after 6 months. But 6 months is very, very short. We don't have any strong change in Japanese market, but we'd like to explain just one word, offshore wind, big advance. So we'd like to focus these topics later. At first, I would like to the general status of Japan again using the slide. How can I use my slide?
That's good. Just if you go to presentation mode and then.
Somebody explain, arranging my presentation.
Okay.
It's okay. I'd like to use my computer at first originally. It's okay.
Yeah.
What happens? Wait a minute. So, yes, here. And yes. It's okay now? Good?
Yes, just if you go to presentation mode.
Presentation mode?
Yes.
Now I put the slideshow for the button, but wait a minute. Is okay now? Or
Perfect. Yes, please.
not perfect. Is perfect? You can use only one big size of the presentation? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now. Now, as I always explained, Japan doesn't appear in the top 8 list in the world as a cumulative total installation of wind power now. For the before 2010, we had a big status of top 10 for the wind power, but for the time being now under the top 10 list. But now our installed capacity is around 3.9 gigawatt, around 4 gigawatt, okay? But we have the big size of large EEZ, exclusive economic zone of ocean. It is our merit to promote offshore wind. And the government has just started designation of offshore wind promotion area. This is this topic. You can see our beautiful wind turbine in the sea as a national project. The first one is a floating offshore wind in Nagasaki. It was built in 2013, 8 years ago. Even now, it does work very well. And this turbine, this project is a key for the government to introduce a new project. Another one is a famous, our project, Fukushima project. You can see 3 units of wind turbines here and one floating substation, a big national project. As you may know, we have some troubles in the big size, 7 megawatt wind turbines. So we are now progressing the project of removal of this unit. Another 2 units are still working to send electricity to Fukushima area. Yes, and now we have the tariff, feed-in tariff 1 year ago for the last 10 years. as you can see, feed-in tariff for offshore wind is 36 Japanese yen per kilowatt hour. You may know that 100 Japanese yen is equal to USA dollars. It means 36 cents USA dollars per kilowatt hour, around 30 US cent euros per kilowatt hour. But now we are going to the auction for a big size of offshore wind. The government has just decided that maximum price of the auction for offshore wind is decided to be 29 Japanese yen per year in auction. Of course, 36 or 29 Japanese yen is larger than that in Europe and other countries. But this high price is a kind of the chance for Japanese industry to be combined in this market. But anyway, the government decided to take maximum price 29 Japanese yen for offshore wind to cut the price of electricity, reduce electricity price. Now, as in April, I explained, now we have the promotion zone in this figure. At that time, we have the one promotion zone, official promotion zone in Nagasaki, where we have the, what shall I say, floating offshore wind, as I have explained. And another three promising zone. But now we are moving to the next step this July. Offshore wind promotion zone by the act of promoting utilization of sea areas in something like that. Of course, this is a Japanese slide. Then I'd like to introduce the similar figures produced by another associations getting materials from Japan. You can see the red area. Red area is now official promotion areas. The four areas: Nagasaki, Chuichi, and Akita. But now, the government has already decided to take another four areas as promising areas. And another 5 or 6 areas is future promotion areas, a kind of candidates. So it's a good step to promote the next, what shall I say? The red one is named as round 1, first round. Now, yellow group is a kind of round, second round. And another one is a third or fourth round. Anyway, the government has a good line to develop offshore wind in Japan now. And some people said, now we have another area for offshore wind. The total area is more than 12 gigawatt as a candidate. Yes, something like that. Now, some of them are under environment impact assessment. You can see so many areas for offshore wind around the Japan islands here now. But furthermore, we have a potential of offshore wind in Japan is estimated to be 10 times as much as total consumption of electricity due to the large EEZ of ocean. So we'd like to push the government to accept this big area for the next stage. Yes, I used the same slides before. For the time being, our government that our government, the target of our government is very, very small for wind. Wind is just 1.7%. Yes, in English is here. Wind is only 1.7%. We need to change this roadmap of the government to develop wind power, including offshore wind. So in order to appeal this our idea, I was invited to NHK TV in April. Yes, I have already explained. Anyway, we are very eager to pass our knowledge to our citizens, our people in Japan. I have already presented a big roadmap, 20 gigawatt by 2030, something like that. But it's a kind of personal proposal to the government. Of course, this roadmap was published in some cabinet of the government 6 or 5 years ago. But anyway, the government, center of the government say it's a private proposal. But now, JWPA, Japan Wind Power Association, the center of the wind power industry, appeals the roadmap of offshore wind in the committee of the government this June. Yes, this is an abstract of this proposal by JWPA. JWPA new target, 10 gigawatt of cumulative capacity by 2030, 1 gigawatt of new capacity every year to increase investment, and another 30 or 45 gigawatt by 2040. Furthermore, 90 gigawatt by 2050, with another 40 gigawatt of onshore, totally 130 gigawatt. Great. It's a 30% of total electricity coming from wind. It's a similar level as another countries such as EU and so developed industry countries. Furthermore, in this committee, Mr. Kajiyama in METI, in the Center of the Government for Energy, exactly followed this target in his concluding remark in that committee. So we are very happy to hear that Mr. Kajiyama, minister, followed this number. We would like him to make the concrete target inside the cabinet as a government. But however, the final target of each electricity will be formally decided in the review of the basic energy plan next year as a government. So please, Minister, Professor Kajiyama keeps his idea to fix the basic energy plan. Until then, we cannot think that he accepts our target, 30% electricity by 2050. And we need to wait the final decision, final review of the basic energy plan next year. Personally, we hope only from now only 1.7% electricity by 2030 will be increased to 5% at least, or 10%, hopefully, in the new basic energy plan 2030, 2050, 30%. So now we are very eager to push the government to develop wind power, focusing on the offshore wind. Yes, now we should propose a challenging roadmap of wind power with big numbers and reasonable cost. Now it's we have some success in doing so. So we should cooperate with local people for the development of ocean energy. It's very important. tomorrow now I will start a big long trip, domestic trip to go to Niigata, Aomori, Iwate, Miyagi, something like that, where they are waiting for the negotiations of the offshore wind development. For the time being, we were suspended from doing it with coronavirus, some inflations, but now we are allowed to go to local area from Tokyo, center of Tokyo, to discuss these topics. And in future, of course, we'd like to invite you, foreign country peoples, to cooperate with us for future offshore wind power in Japan. Yes, thank you very much for your kind participation in my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chuichi. I think these are also very good news we hear from Japan. I mean, hearing that the minister has changed the position of the government. So we hope that becomes soon a formal decision. We keep our fingers crossed for you, of course. And yeah, so it seems that this COVID-19 situation is indeed leading to governments focusing more on what the domestic needs are. That this I understand from what you say as well in Japan. So during that situation, government has become more positive against wind power.
Yeah. Of course, now we had some long time to wait for the small condition of coronavirus, but now we have the kind of steady conditions. Now the government allows us to go outside from Tokyo to local people. So they prepare some local, our rule, go to travel from Tokyo, something like that. So we are now eager to have good communication with local people for offshore wind. Of course, for the time being, we need to stop supply chain for manufacturing the wind turbines, something like that. But now we gradually restart this activities for future development of offshore wind. Of course, we have the onshore wind project. Gradually we develop onshore wind project too.
Let me briefly maybe add some information on this, because we as World Wind Energy Association, we've just started a project on women in community wind, which will analyze the role that women play in community wind projects, which are of course land-based projects. And we will gather information about the role of women as shareholders and on management side in Germany and in parallel with in Japan. And Chuichi, just to let you know that Professor Mimi, whom you recommended, she has joined the advisory board of this project. So we have also excellent contribution and experts there from Japan. That just mentioned as a side note, we will certainly do extra webinars on this area as well. But again, thank you so much to Tokyo. And then we will go to our next speaker. Have a very good evening, and maybe we can see that there are some questions in the chat for you, Chuichi. Now we move on and go to China. China, very interesting to see, of course, as by far the largest wind power market around the world. And I'm very pleased to have here with us Mr. Yu Guiyong from the Chinese Wind Energy Association. And you will share with us information about how the current developments are in China. Yu, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for your introduction. And can you see my screen now?
Yes, if you just go to presentation mode, then I think it's also
excellent. Yeah,
wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. Good morning and good evening, everyone. And I'm very pleased to join you here today. And since we are still on vacation for the national anniversary, so I'm back in my home and work today. And so I will take about several minutes to give you a brief introduction about what's happening in China for the first half of this year and the impacts of COVID-19 and our maybe the next 5 years plan. So far, we see in the last year, we saw a very stable increase for the annual installation. So the newest installed wind power capacity in China is 27.5 gigawatt, with a year-on-year increase rate of 30%. So by the end of last year, the cumulative installed wind power capacity was 237 gigawatt. And we have already finished our targets for the 13th five-year plan, with a year-on-year growth rate of more than 50%. And for this year, we see the new added capacity for the first half of 2020 by our status. So for the first half of this year, there's already 6.3 gigawatt has integrated into the grid. By integrated into the grid, I mean there is more than this number has installed. Maybe around 8 gigawatt has installed, but some part of them, a certain part of them are still testing and not yet integrated into the grid and put into operation. So among the 6.3 gigawatt, we have 1 gigawatt offshore wind. So we see this year, the offshore wind is still increased very fast. So it is estimated about more than 30 gigawatt will be installed and integrated by the end of this year. As everybody knows, the feed-in tariff policy in China will come to the end by this year for onshore wind, and will come to the deadline for offshore wind by the end of next year. So just like the media or newspaper size, well, there's an installation rush in China. So everybody, every company want to install as much as possible just before the end of this policy. So it's much reasonable, and hopefully we can see much bigger annual installation capacity in this year and the next year. And also, we see actually just for the first quarter of this year, we have influenced by the COVID-19, but gradually with the much stable circumstance in China, by the strongly control of the government, we have back to the right track for since the second quarter of this year. So we see the construction is less influenced, but we still see there is some lag behind according to the original plan. But the industry have confidence to catch up with the original plan by the end of this year. So maybe we will match up the impact of the influence for the COVID-19. The lag behind will catch up. So offshore wind project construction is a little bit behind the schedule, and it's much less affected comparatively speaking with the onshore wind. So since there's one more year left to complete the task, according to the subsidy reduction policy, because the offshore project will come to the deadline for the feed-in tariff next year, at the end of next year. So hopefully we can make it with the joint efforts of the whole industry. And also our concern for Chinese wind power industry is that the global outbreak or the unstable situation so far may have impact on China market. So far we have not less influenced by COVID-19 according to other countries, or especially with the European or America. But we are just consuming our installation or our storages. So if the whole situation is not quite stable for the next 2 quarters of this year, well, for the next year, so there may be much more influence for China's imported components. So because the repertory of imported components will run out. So that's our major concern. The import and the export of raw materials such as basswood and PVC from Italy, and components like main bearings, gearbox bearings, and IGBT chips from European countries will begin to be restricted. So we hope, since wind power is a highly globalized industry, we hope Chinese wind power industry can have much more stronger international cooperation with other countries and other parts of the world to build a stronger supply chain for the whole industry, especially for the supply chains for offshore wind, because some part of the offshore wind components is supplied from the international supply chains. And after the COVID-19, I have heard that many countries and communities issuing or announcing economic recovery stimulus package. China is as well, and the government and the industry and some institutions and the research institutions, including universities, are just arguing and discussing our stimulus package. And we are trying to put the package to lay emphasis on clean energy, including wind power and PV industry. So we will see a much more flexible capital inflows for the industry. And also we see a new story just happened here. Maybe you have already noticed that the Chinese wind and other renewable energies will receive new targets because at the general debate of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly last month, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced that China aims to have the emissions peak before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. We have 10 years more than the European target, but on the basis of a Chinese situation and the Chinese energy structure, we have much way to go. We have much more burden. So it means huge development potentials for wind power to support a clean energy consumption by 2030 and 2060. That means for every year we need at least 10 gigawatt annual installation for wind and solar. So 50 gigawatts annual installation for 100 gigawatts for wind and solar, because if we want to get the carbon neutrality by 2060, that means in the following 40 years, we have to reach the target of the electricity. All electricity comes from clean energy, including mainly from renewables. So for wind, at least 1/3 electricity comes from wind, and 1/3 from PV, solar PV electricity, and 1/3 from other like biomass or nuclear, other things. So we have to have the pure, clean electricity. That means, so that's really a burden for China, and but it's a bright side and a very ambitious target for Chinese wind power. That's so it's also the first time for Chinese government issues a very clear timetable for the target of carbon neutrality. So we will see this will translated into our wind power and solar PV power's new targets, and will influence our fourth 5-year plans planning. So as everybody knows, our 14th 5-year plan is just formulating and will issue next year. So that will be a great influence on this. And that's all what I want to share with you all. And thank you, Stephen. I'm happy to have your questions.
Well, you see me now just, wow, that is kind of overwhelming message, of course, what you say that first, congratulations that you obviously managed in China to overcome the COVID-19 crisis with the, sounds like a new record of new installations in 2020, but also the climate neutrality, of course, translated then into annual installations. You were talking about 100 gigawatt of annual solar and wind combined, which I think is impressive, and that's of course great news. So from my side, that is answering the questions. It rather gives us food for thought what that means for the rest of the world, because certainly other countries will be impressed and will also then have to take similar targets and steps. We have at the moment no questions. I think everybody is impressed and overwhelmed. Special thank you for, in spite of having your public holiday, for contributing this. And if you just stay a little bit longer and we see that if there are still questions coming up for you, I'd be request you to answer them. But I think it was a very comprehensive presentation. Now, thank you again to China, and we move on to India. And I have the pleasure to have the Indian Wind Power Association. And here we have as our speaker, Mr. Rajsekhar Buddhavarapu. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. Well, we're happy to have India here as well, also with ambitious targets we know from the past years. And now we look forward to hearing from India firsthand what India is going to do and how the situation is in this, at this point of time. Do we have Mr. Rajsekhar? He's still muted? No, he's not muted.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. And thank you for pronouncing my family name, a difficult name, well.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm trying to see how I can put this up and share the presentation. And I think I'm just about to do that. It's so yeah, is my presentation up? And I'll just make it full screen. Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, gentlemen, and We are honored to be part of this presentation and present the India perspective as to where we are and how the COVID affected the first half of this whole year and what is the future direction ahead. So we titled it as Indian Wind Energy Landscape Way Forward Post COVID-19. This presentation structure is essentially very simple. The first is a snapshot of what is the installations in this year vis-a-vis the last year and what the government targets are and have they changed, have they been reviewed, where we are. Give you a perspective as to how the tender biddings have been happening in India. As you know, since 2017, we have been going through reverse tender biddings. Um, give you a perspective of where the tariffs are and how they are moving. Um, Very specifically trying to address as to how the COVID-19 situation clearly affected India and this wind energy sector. And a majority of the focus of this presentation is in terms of as to what are the way forward initiatives that the government has thought about, and that's broadly laid across in three broad categories where wind is the central role, is in terms of hybrids, RTC power, RTC standing for round the clock power, and offshore wind. So in terms of the installations and the status as the government of India targets, so first the installation. So the first circle that you see, this is around 2 gigawatts, 2.1 gigawatts that was installed last year across majoritarily 9 states in India, the 9 windy states in India. Um, and majority of that happened in Gujarat last year. This is the last financial year. The financial year in India starts from 1st of April and ends on the 31st of the next year. This was the achievement last financial year. This financial year, this is data till the 30th of August, not 30th of September, which is the half yearly, but it's roughly around the same. It's roughly a fraction of what it was last year. Projecting it the way forward, it might be one third or one fourth of the installations that might happen, that has happened over last year. As regards the targets, the government is severely constrained and it has been constantly been trying to talk to the developers, manufacturers, and the involved financial institutions. The targets for achieving 60 gigawatts of wind um, is still the same and it has not changed. In fact, very early in this year, there has been a revised target as the future targets in line with the Paris climate change commitment. That is to have the GHG emission intensity of our GDP to be reduced by 35% below the 2005 levels by 2030. And consistent with that, the Prime Minister and the Government of India have set a target to have 450 gigawatts of renewable energy generation by year 2030. The Central Electricity Authority, the planning body of the government, thinks that it is going to be around 140 gigawatts of wind that is going to be by year 2030. The balance majority of it coming from solar, around 300 megawatts. Now, in terms of the tender bids, this slide is little small, but it is essentially from the government website, which essentially indicates that roughly 75% of the bidded out tendered capacity has been bidded out till date. So of the 12.6 gigawatts that were tendered out, around 9.4 gigawatts have been awarded, and roughly 7.4 gigawatts are the projects which are currently under construction. The various of the projects have just been awarded in the last couple of months. So essentially, we are today around 7.4 gigawatts of capacity is under construction. This is this is being monitored by the Central Electricity Authority, and majority of them have been in this COVID time been affected by the delay in the power sale agreement with the discoms that had happened over the last 6-8 months. Now, in terms of the wind energy tender tariffs, this is an evolution that has happened since the reverse bidding was adopted in 2017, somewhere in February of 2017 until date. If you see the number 3.46, this is rupees per kilowatt hour, Indian rupees. There was 3.46. There was the first one that was bidded out for around 1,000 odd megawatts, 1,050 megawatts in February of 2017, 3.46. But since then, in all the majority of the tendered bids, the lowest discovered tariff fixed price for 25 years has been fairly constant in a steady band. The average tariff since the beginning of 2017 till now, since when the reverse bidding has happened, has been around 3.8 US dollar cents roughly. This is a very good heartening situation that there's not that much of market volatility here. Now, in terms of what is the COVID situation that happened in India, as you all know, that India had one of the most severest lockdown that happened. And this is very matching with the very high population density and the low public health spend and facilities that are available, apart from the private sector that has been doing damn well, is that there had been a very severe lockdown and everything came to a standstill in an as is what is condition, affecting the whole wind energy sector. Um, After the initial lockdown, the government of India opened up the essential aspects of the economy and allowed them to be operating, and wind energy sector was part of that. Um, the other major part during this COVID situation has been that the government has been in dialogue with the financial institutions, developers, and OEMs, and it is now considered that the COVID-19 lockdown situation will be earmarked as a force majeure situation if there are any such contractual situations that might happen. Also, for for all those projects which fall during this time in contractually to be completing their COD or other things, they have been given extension to be for achieving their project closure for an additional days, more than the lockdown period plus 30 days. Very another noteworthy point during the same COVID time, a development that has happened was there was an government to government Indo-Danish partnership that came about, which started to really focus on offshore and also with an intention to set up a center for renewable energy excellence, which is going to be covering onshore wind, hybrids, energy storage, essentially to affect optimal grid integration with focus on capacity building, R&D, and testing. So this has been a very good forthcoming thing. Um, and all along the last 6, 7, 8 days since, or 9 months since last 9 months, the government has been very steadfast and has actually reaffirmed their commitment for renewable energy, as I has been mentioning before. Now, in terms of the new initiatives that the government of India has been talking about, as I'm going to be talking about hybrids, RTC, round the clock power, and about offshore wind. This, what I'm trying to talk about is basically about hybrids. Now, what the government of India has realized is standalone wind or a standalone solar, apart from rooftop solar, may not be the full-time solution for all the energy needs in the power system in India, and that there is an advantage of having wind and solar as an hybrid. So there have been since December of 18, there have been three bids for wind solar hybrid without storage, and these have been awarded, and the tariffs have been ranging from 3.6 to 4.4 US dollar cents, and the last one being in January of 2020. These are wind solar projects without storage. The, the essential logic behind that is that there is certainty with the solar generation from starting with the sunrise and ending with the sunset. But these needs and development of solar in India has been largely been driven in terms of large infrastructure like solar parks, and they needed huge power evacuation, grid extension kind of an efforts, which have been largely been socialized. But the reason um, when the reason for arguing for having a wind solar hybrid is because the wind generation in terms of a profile diurnally and seasonally has been that it is high in the evenings and early morning, so it's a very good complementary match with the solar generation that happens in the daytime that enables the utilization of the grid extension that has been done, the grid infrastructure much better. Now, further to that, what the logic the government of India has been thinking is that they need to be, if you are able to add storage, then you could optimize on the dispatch of the generated wind and solar generation and also on the power evacuation infrastructure. So there has been one major project of around 900 megawatts that was bidded out in March of this year. One was with pump storage and one was with the battery, and there was a price differential, one for the peak time and one was for the off-peak time. The off-peak tariffs were fixed at $4 and people had to bid for the peak power supply, and there was a very defined window in the morning times and in the evening times to be meeting the morning peak and the evening peak. In addition to that, what the government of India has taken it on record as saying that the way forward is to be looking at hybrid projects and employing the same solar park infrastructure uh, paradigm of development, wherein the land, permits, and power evacuation are all well prepared beforehand and then allotted, tendered, so that the gestation period for the private developers reduce. Is on the same lines. Multi-gigawatt hybrid parks are being planned. What is on record is there are two 25 gigawatt hybrid parks are being planned, one in the northwestern state of Rajasthan and one in the western state of Gujarat. In addition, it is also believed that um, in the coming 2 years, there are going to be multiple flexible power, firm dispatch, hybrid projects with storage that are going to come by. One of the immediate ones, which might happen in the very soon, in the next couple of months, is the 1200 megawatts tranche 3 of the SECI hybrid bid, which typically had been only as without storage, but we think that this tranche 3 might have a storage component built in also. Now, in terms of the RTC power, round the clock power, one of the background for this particular slide, which seems to be a little crowded, I will walk you through. In the very beginning, when the National Solar Mission started in 2010, the tariffs for solar PV were very high. One of the ways that the government had thought about was to be using the old depreciated coal-based power plants whose tariffs were around 2 rupees, Indian rupees per kilowatt hour, and bundling it with 3 units of solar and make the average price to be more amenable for customers to have come by. But because of the recent reverse bids and the market discovery of tariff bids, the solar and wind prices have become much cheaper than any new built coal-based power plants or the recently built coal-based power plants. So as a result, what the government has not thought about is to have uh, to be issuing, and this might happen again very soon in the next couple of months, is to be having bundling tender wherein 5 gigawatts of renewable plus coal-based power plants can be bidded as a project. The essential details of that is that wind and solar PV are eligible renewable energy technologies which can be co-located or be placed in the same regional grid where the coal-based power plant is based. The minimum bidding size is around 250 megawatts and the maximum is 5 gigawatts. Already commissioned renewable energy projects or any enhancement of an existing project are not eligible. So a renewable energy components have to be newly built. As regards the coal-based power plants, only the unrequisitioned or untied up megawatt capacity outside the long-term PPAs are eligible to be part. The essential criteria for that is that 51% of the annual energy has to be from renewable energy. The balance could be from the coal-based power plant, but the minimum is 51%. And the developers are encouraged, if they find it in whichever way that they want to do, any kind of energy storage solutions to balance and to be able to to manage the dispatch of power as per the terms and conditions of the bid. In addition, just recently in May of 2020, in tender title as RTC was for 400 megawatts. This was awarded at something like 3.8 US dollar cents. This was essentially not an RTC, round the clock firm power, but essentially an high PLF tender where the PLFs needed to be around 80-85%. Though it is so, while it is classified as RTC, it was a learning process for the government and the government bidding agencies to come by. And I think taking cue from that, the next other 5 gigawatts and other bids will be coming by. This will be my last slide. I want to be talking about the offshore wind, and India does present a huge opportunity for offshore wind, especially when the viability and the commercial viability for floating foundations is now getting established, and it is becoming a norm for project financing, bank financing across the world. And given also that there are now a great importance and focus being given to the hydrogen, so power to X, the hydrogen production that is going to be possible with respect to large offshore projects. Um, India, as a result, because of its already onshore manufacturing wind capacity of around nearly 10 gigawatts a year, um, does present a great opportunity to being in a South Asian a hub for manufacturing and the EPC logistics kind of an hub. The government of India was very caught on to this idea. They were probably a little early in and aggressive in setting the targets, and they had set a target to have 5 gigawatts of offshore wind by year 2022, and which is now not possible, and the government recognizes that, and 30 gigawatts by year 2030. Um, in lieu of that, in June of 2018, the government had issued an expression of interest and for international competition, international bid, and there was a huge response to that. The government has been trying to process and to understand what are the things that is there. The government is trying to reduce the risks of the project so that the tariff bids that the developers will make is going to be far more saner than having to be to factor in risk, and so that the tariffs are larger. So whether it be the seabed terrain or the geology or the wind conditions or the environmental impact assessments or the planning permissions, the government has been working in trying to get this across and laid such a way that it is going to be a single window kind of a thing. So once it's awarded, it's a kind of only the standard compliances that the bidders will have to be doing, and they can go ahead with construction and commissioning. The due date for the tendering is still to be announced. Then the not much idea as to when that is going to be happening. I think COVID situation is also has affected this decision making to go ahead on that. As regards the potential, there has been a recent study following the two European Commission projects that happened in India. One was called the Facilitating Offshore Wind in India, called FOWIND, and then there was another subsequent project which was called the First Offshore Wind Project in India, FOPI. And following that, there have been some specific studies done across the two states in India, one the southern state Tamil Nadu and one the western state Gujarat. And 70 gigawatts of offshore potential has been estimated at these places. With this, I Stephen, I come to an end to my presentation, and I'm more than willing to take up any questions that you or your viewers or participants may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think this is also impressive figures we heard from you now from India. Great to hear the long-term ambitions on the one hand, also that India is already looking into hybridization of renewable energy, not only looking into wind, but wind and solar and in combination with other technologies. I understand from you that you see some impact of the COVID-19 now this year. You said there is some delay, but not in the mid or long term, which I think is in line with what our previous speaker said, that actually, yeah, wind power has a bright future, obviously, in India as well. You've mentioned the 6.7 gigawatt of wind farms under construction at this point of time. Can you specify how much of that will be finalized this year?
Yeah, to be fair, a lot of this a lot of the 7.3 gigawatts of wind projects which are under construction come under. So these are projects that they have won under the SECI tender bidding framework, and they have, I think, 24 months. In most of the cases, 24 months to achieve the commissioning. Some earlier projects had 18 months. Right away, I can't say how much would be coming up of that would be. See, the last of the bid happened in August of 2020, which is around 970 megawatts. So it's nearly 1 gigawatt. So 1 gigawatt of that capacity will definitely be coming 2 years later. So I could calculate that, but I don't have the figure right away in my head.
If I may ask another question, we heard at a previous webinar that some of the medium, smaller investors, and I know that these are the companies that you have as members, that they are struggling a bit with the auction system in India because prices are going down a lot and they may not be able to compete on that basis. How would you see that situation? Is that something that has a short-term or medium-term or long-term impact?
A very good question, Stephen. I think it has to do a little bit of the framework design of the marketplace. The tariffs have had a dramatic drop in value from where we were before, and it's for the kind of wind regime that we are here to have such low tariffs is really amazing, and that has happened largely on the fact that the scale of the projects have become so big. To just give you a perspective, by the end of 2015, I had constructed and commissioned and developed, constructed and commissioned and operated a 700 megawatts portfolio of wind, and I was the largest asset owner in the country. But if you now come back into 2020, a single project award is of the order of the size 700 megawatts. Now, so the economies of scale are playing greatly in getting the prices low, both in terms of negotiation levels and also in the scale of operations and optimization. So yes, the smaller investors who were earlier doing projects less than 50 megawatt are finding it difficult to be competing with the big boys who are trying to do 702 gigawatt single location projects, and that is becoming a challenge. But I think there is a dialogue that is going on and that is led by IWPA in trying to see as to how there could be a window within the current framework of market mechanism and rules where the smaller guys could be competing and be able to have an option, and so that their small and medium enterprises can gain as before with clean energy small projects that they take on themselves.
Very, very good. And I think very important aspect. And we know this from around the world. We see here a comment from Korea. There is a matter of acceptance in Korea as well. That's where we are. That's why we have this topic of community power as something we find important in order to distribute the value created amongst as many as possible. But thanks a lot for your insights. I would also like to welcome here our Vice President from India, and I'm sure you know each other well, Dr. Jami Hossain. Jami, yes.
Hi, Jami.
So Jami, you are, I don't think you are based at the same place, but Jami, just also welcome to you. And if you like to say a few words as well.
Yeah, thank you, Rajshekar. You spoke very well and very comprehensively about all the major issues and developments in India. A lot of these developments are new, like the hybrids and the RTC, and offshore has been hanging around for a long time, but developments are there. So I think really very good presentation, and it must have been very useful for all the participants. Well, I would just like to add that Stephen and all the other participants, that all these things have been possible. Of course, one major aspect is policy and FIT and the market structure and all these things, but also because of the technology. And the technology has evolved quite significantly, even in India, though we do not have these 5 megawatt wind turbines at the moment, but we have almost wind turbines of the order of 3 megawatt being installed. And we have now technologies which are going to give us something, what we call plant load factor or capacity factor of, something of the order of 40% plus. So Rajshekar, who is handling one of the IPPs, would be knowing better than me what kind of technologies are there and what kind of capacity factors are there. So as we move higher in the capacity factor, 40%, 50%, then we are almost coming close to thermal. Thermal is 60% on an average, 65% on an average in India. So this is a big thing. And once we combine solar and wind, so we are almost talking about firm power from renewable energy, which will go a long way in meeting our power requirements. And probably, I think soon enough we will forget about coal. So let us hope so. And of course, offshore is there, and floating is a good idea. So thank you, Rajshekar, very well, and thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. And then let's make a very small announcement at this point of time, and you will all get to know more information. Jami, I think we can just mention that at this point of time that we're planning to have our next World Wind Energy Conference in India, and we'll come back to you with more information in very soon, and contact, of course, some of you bilaterally in the next couple of days.
Yeah, so Stephen is cooking something. He'll come up very fast. Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you so much to India, which is, as I think at the moment still in terms of population, the second, but soon the largest in terms of population, overtaking China in terms of population. Hopefully then soon the race starts, we will have more installed wind and solar capacity. Now moving a little bit again more to the west, you notice we started with those people in Australia who are now latest in the evening, and now we go to our westernmost market that we are looking at today, and this is Pakistan. And I have a great pleasure to welcome here Zishan Ashfaq, who is our former representative who worked several years for WWA in Pakistan. Zishan, you are still working with us and kind of being the contact person, but you are now working for developer Sovitech, so you have now kind of changed side and working now on the business side, and I'm very happy to have you here and presenting us about how the Pakistani wind market is developing. Zishan.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for having me. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone, considering the different time zones. I will be briefly talking about the status of wind power in Pakistan, but before moving towards that, I just want to briefly introduce myself. Stefan has already done that, but I have a long relation with the World Wind Energy Association. I was working as the country representative until the first half of this year, and then I joined Sovitech from April, which is one of the leading renewable energy developers worldwide. So we have a strong base in Latin America, and now we are expanding to, other markets in Asia, and, being in Pakistan is one of the steps of our expansion. So, my presentation will mainly be focusing on the status of, wind power in Pakistan. Since the market is small and, it was not affected much by the COVID-19, except for, certain delays in the construction period of, under construction wind power projects. And those delays were only for 3 to 4 months. And now the wind market is back on track. I mean, when we talk about the construction of under construction wind projects. So I'll be briefly talking about the trends in the wind power development market, and moving forward, we will talk about the policy, renewable energy policy that has been finalized after a delay of 2 years, and we'll also be looking at the drivers and barriers to the wind power market growth in Pakistan. If we look at the total installed capacity, it is around 35 gigawatt, and the peak demand in summer is around 27 gigawatt, and the demand peak demand goes as low as to 7 to 8 gigawatt in winter, putting the power planner in a very difficult situation. And then, the maximum demand that can be met in Pakistan is around 23 gigawatt because of the system constraints, grid infrastructure, and, distribution network is weak. Therefore, it cannot supply, electricity to meet the power demand in Pakistan. When we talk about the per capita consumption of electricity, it is among the lowest in the world, which stands at 529 kilowatt hour per person per year. So which presents quite poor state of affairs. And looking at the installed power generation mix, it is mainly dominated by thermal generation, which presents a staggering share of over 60%, which is followed by hydro power projects, which stands at around 30%, and we have renewables and nuclear at the bottom. And in renewables, if we talk about wind power, the share is 4% of the total power mix, and when it comes to final generation, it is even less than that, and it stands at 1.2% of the total generation in Pakistan. If we look at the resource potential, it is very small. In fact, it's negligible. Looking at the resource potential, Pakistan has a theoretical wind potential of 346 gigawatt. Resource-rich areas are in the south of the country, and also, southwest of the country, close to Iran border. If you look at the circle here, where my cursor is right now, this is the Jhimpir-Keti Bandar wind corridor, which alone holds a wind power potential of around 60 gigawatt, and out of which 11 to 13 gigawatt is economically viable given the land use constraints and other constraints. And so far we have developed around 1.2 gigawatt of wind power projects. I'll come back to that later. And now the government is also looking to harness the wind potential in the southwestern side, on the western border of Pakistan. And the recent numbers that have been shared by Balochistan Energy Department present a quite promising picture, because the Balochistan Energy Department is of the view that the wind potential in Chagi area is 25% better than the one in Jhimpir and KT Bandha wind corridor. So which is quite promising, but since it is far away from the load centers, it will take a few more years to basically construct required grid infrastructure to evacuate power from that area to the load centers. So the first policy for developing renewable energy projects in Pakistan was introduced in 2006, which provided several fiscal and financial incentives for developing renewable energy projects. And it took 7 years for Pakistan to develop its first renewable energy project in 2013. And afterwards, we've been seeing a steady growth in the wind power market in Pakistan, and the number at the moment stands at around 1237 megawatt, and this number is expected to increase to 1847 megawatts, as around 610 megawatts of wind projects are under construction. We don't see any capacity additions in 2020 and 2021, simply because during the period 2016 to 2018, the government prioritized coal-fired and LNG-based power projects. Therefore, the growth of wind and solar got hit heavily. Although wind is already, the cheapest form of electricity, at that point in time, the tariffs were higher. I'll show you in my next slide, but if we look at the cost reduction trend, we can simply see that government committed a grave mistake by introducing RLNG and coal-fired projects, which have now put the country in a capacity trap, and we are running in surplus capacity. And if we look at the cost trends, the first project that was, the first tariff that was announced in 2011 was 14.6 US cents per kilowatt hour. That was followed by a tariff in a couple of years later that was 13.5 US cents. And at the moment, the tariff is at 3.25 US cents, and which is quite remarkable. But if we talk about this tariff that was awarded earlier this year to 4 projects, this 3.2 cents tariff is an average tariff, because the tariff for 4 projects ranged from 3.1 to 3.5. Therefore, I have picked an average number here. All 4 projects, they have filed a review petition because they don't find this tariff reasonable. But even if we look at the tariff, which is 4.5 US cents per kilowatt hour, and around 12 projects are under construction with this tariff, the number is quite remarkable. And it is a reduction of around 70%, in just 7 to 8 years, which cannot be ignored. And similarly, for the EPC price, if you look at your screen, in the beginning, per megawatt cost for wind power projects was around 2.24, which has gone down to as low as 0.9 million, which again is quite remarkable, and we see a reduction of 60% in last 8-9 years. The market share is basically distributed among leading Western and Chinese wind turbine manufacturers. The market leader is General Electric, which is which has a quite strong base in Pakistan, followed by Gold Wind, which is a Chinese manufacturer, and then at number 3 is Nordex, and other turbine manufacturers are also present in the market. If we look at the under construction projects, we see Siemens Gamesa coming up with the 410 megawatts of projects, followed by Gold Wind and GE. I would like to mention here that it's you don't find such kind of diversity in similar size market in other parts of the world, and I think Pakistan should take benefit of such diversity, because it will eventually result in installation of better technology in the country when it comes to wind power deployment. Looking at the policy framework, as I have mentioned earlier, the policy which is Alternative and Renewable Energy Policy 2020, it has been approved by the Council of Common Interest after a delay of more than 2 years because of certain differences among the federal and the provincial governments. But thankfully enough that we have the policy approved now, and it will soon be placed on the National Gazette of Pakistan. So the policy sets a target to achieve 20% share of renewables in the total power mix of Pakistan by 2025 and 30% by 2030. And followed by the policy, there is an indicative generation capacity expansion plan, which chalks out a yearly target of wind and solar by the year 2030. So for wind, the number is around 8.3 gigawatt, whereas for solar it is around 12 gigawatt. The plan is still, with the National Electric Power Regulatory Authority for approval, and hopefully it will be approved in a couple of months. But if we look at the targets here, they seem quite ambitious. Looking at the Pakistani market, because the demand is not growing as much, and in my independent assessment, we don't see that much of wind and solar being added by the year 2030, and according to our estimates, the total wind capacity that would be added by 2030 would be around 3 to 4 gigawatt, which is quite remarkable if we achieve that number in Pakistan. If we take a look at the market drivers and barriers for drivers, the first and the foremost thing is that wind is already the cheapest source of power generation in Pakistan. It used to be solar with 3.7 US cents per kilowatt hour, but the new tariff that has been given for wind projects is even lesser than that and stands at 3.25 US cents. And I think it is a world record in a sense that we don't have such low level of tariff under a stable regime of cost plus. We have seen lower tariffs than this under auctions and under bidding, but such kind of low tariff has not been experienced are seen under a framework of cost plus or upfront tariff. The second driver is that, of course, as I've already mentioned, that power sector is dominated by fossil fuels and thermal generation, and most of which is imported. So, wind will certainly reduce dependency on fossil fuels, and thereby, reducing the trade deficit of the country. And, country is already under huge financial and economic stress at the moment. The third driver is a very good resource availability in southern part of the country and southwestern part of the country, as I mentioned earlier. And in the presence of good resource and coupled with the low cost of wind power, it is expected to grow exponentially in the coming years. When we talk about the power demand, as I've already mentioned that we are in kind of surplus capacity, but the government has planned to shut down around 3 to 3.5 gigawatt of inefficient thermal power plants that were installed in 90s, and they were mainly based on RFO and gas generation, and those plants are expected to retire. 1.5 gigawatt will be shut down immediately, while the remaining plants will be stopped in the next couple of years. And apart from that, additional capacity, additional demand is expected to come from stopping the captive power projects, which are running on subsidized gas supply, and and the total number of that projects reach to around 4 to 5 gigawatt, and those plants are quite inefficient, and this important resource cannot be used for such inefficient plants. That's the realization at least at the government's end, and let's see how it comes out, and let's see how the government plans to shut those power plants. Apart from the drivers, there are certain barriers that have been hindering the growth of wind power market, and that will continue to hinder the market growth. First and the foremost one is the surplus capacity. As I think I have already talked about that, we have around 2 to 3 gigawatt of surplus capacity, but that is mainly due to system constraints, because the demand is there, but the system can only supply around 23 gigawatt of electricity. So if transmission network and distribution networks are reinforced, there is investment in that sector, and this capacity surplus issue can be overcome. The second barrier is the coal pipeline. We have around 4 to 4.5 gigawatt of coal-fired projects in pipeline that are expected to come online in the coming 5-6 years. It is very important to mention here that Pakistan is among the very few countries which started harnessing its renewable energy resources before deploying coal-fired projects. But now we see this trend reversing, which is quite unfortunate. But it is a reality, and coal pipeline will basically hinder the growth of renewable energy going forward. Grid constraints are there, as they are found in most of the countries, most of the developing countries. In Pakistan, the grid infrastructure is not that strong. Even the projects which are connected to the grid they complain about forced shutdowns and continuous tripping, tripping. So therefore, weak grid infrastructure is going to remain a serious barrier when it comes to deploying additional renewable energy in the future. Similarly, delays at policy and regulatory level have delayed projects in the past, and we are expecting the same in the future as well, because although the policy has been approved, it has not been announced in the National Gazette as well, and we've been waiting for that for the past 3 months now, and we also don't see an action plan to implement that policy. So this a particular variable is going to hinder the growth of wind energy in Pakistan. There is an off-taker risk as well, because the circular debt in the country is piling up, and central power purchasing agencies' financial health is not that good, and it might create troubles for it to pay to independent power producers in the future. So that's it from me. If I hope my presentation gave you an understanding of the wind power market of Pakistan. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sishan. That was, as usual, a very comprehensive picture of the wind market with all its specific, I think, risks and opportunities that you have. Just one question, the very concrete one. What is the short-term or direct? Is there a direct impact of the current COVID-19 crisis in Pakistan? Are there any delays in the projects?
Yeah, the impact has not been that much, but projects that are under construction were delayed by 3 to 4 months, but now they are back on track, and construction has been started for those projects. But when we talk about the power demand during the lockdown, the demand went down quite dramatically, but it is back to normal now.
Okay, so you would also say, like, it's in the other markets that there's actually just a short-term impact and no long-term impact expected.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think it's very good to hear also from the perspective of a still rather young market, which Pakistan is. Just a couple of years ago, the market started to really become sizable. Thanks a lot to, I assume you're in Islamabad?
Yes, I am in Islamabad.
Greetings to Islamabad. And now let's see whether we have any questions left here. I think we're well on time still. And I see there's one question that is related to the cost of offshore wind in India, Japan, Korea, and China. And I also see that one, and that is our friend from China, has already delivered the answer. Now I would try to answer or ask the other colleagues to also answer the question as far as it's possible. First from India, Mr. Rajsekhar, can you already say something about the cost of offshore wind in India? I think that is more at the moment in a planning phase, but you've got an answer?
Not really. I mean, it's too early to say what the costs are going to be in India, because it's very much related to the infrastructure, port and vessels. So too early to say what exactly the cost would be.
Yeah, there's not really yet the market there. No? So I think that's important to understand. Japan, it's, I think, a bit more advanced than, but you spoke about the feed-in tariff, or yes. the not feed-in tariff, actually, it was the maximum
Yes,
cap.
you are right. We are now changing the system from feed-in tariff to a kind of auction for offshore wind. Now, 36 Japanese yen per kilowatt hour in feed-in tariff is changed to be 29 Japanese yen, around 29 cent US cent per kilowatt hour now. But of course, this is a maximum value for the auction. Yes.
Yes, I think that gives an indication, which is quite actually different from other markets, but we know Japan always has different cost and price structure. Now, Korea, Mr. Chair, or we can also ask Professor Son, what is your take on price costing in Korea, offshore wind?
Just a moment. Yeah.
Professor Son is still also there? Maybe you can both.
Hello?
Yeah. Professor Son, you've got any insights what the cost of offshore wind in Korea would be?
It's a little bit difficult to explain because we have some regulation. There is quite difficult. There's some offshore. How can I say? There is a little bit. I had already several times in my presentation about this offshore the prices, but there is not. We have the how says REC concept is. Mr. Choi, could you explain about this REC and the S&P price?
Yeah, one kilowatt hour, 1 megawatt hour. 달러로 계산해 주세요. Sorry.
170, 170원이면은.
Oh no. 1 kilowatt hour. 170 Korean dollar onshore is yes onshore, yeah. But and offshore 200 more, yeah.
That's around
15 Korean dollar.
A bit more than 15 euro cents, no?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it's 15 euro cents in onshore. But this offshore is already different because the distance from shore side. So there is some regulation. So 1 point or the 2 point or the 3.5 more so three times more than onshore. For example, is the offshore wind farm distance from the shore side more than where is more than 5 kilometers. 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers. Then it's they get some more good price. More than onshore side. It's a little difficult to explain about this offshore the price.
Sorry.
Can you calculate this? For example, is the Tamna offshore wind park. So you can explain a little bit about that. Actually.
Maybe you can also explain in Korean, and Professor Son can translate.
저기 onshore 1 kilowatt hour is 0.19 $0.19. Sorry. Okay, yeah. And sorry. Repeat. Yeah. Onshore 1 kilowatt hour costs USD $0.50. Yeah.
Okay, that is
and
$50. That means that is then even substantially higher than what we heard from Japan.
Offshore.
Good. So we have, I think, an indication now of that the prices are still rather in the higher sphere, also compared to, let's say, the European installations, which are now they started at that level as well. And it'd be interesting to see how the price will develop over time. After the first large installations have been made, I think Korea and Japan, both countries, of course, with similar geographic conditions, we will see. And I think in a couple of years, thinking back about this discussion today, will be interesting to understand the development. Well, again, then, thank you from my side. I do not see any other questions or comments from our audience. I'd like just to summarize that I think these were excellent presentations from the most important wind power markets in Australia and Asia. Good news is that although there is an impact of the COVID-19 situation, we were even less sure, of course, when we had the webinar in April. The impact seems to be not too bad. There's some delay, we understand, in some markets, but in a country like China, even we would even not say that there is a negative impact if we expect more than 30 gigawatt of new installations in this year. So in the long term, I think that's the good news, what we hear from now. We expect a rather positive development. Now we prepared, and let's conclude with that. We prepared a brief poll for all of you. We'd like to just have a look and let us know what you think about how we would describe the current situation of the wind industry in your country at this point of time, and how we would describe the current situation of the global wind industry, aside from where you are. Brief answer to that would be very helpful. I see the first answers are now coming in. So actually, positive assessment of the situation so far by majority. Now some people see the negative. Okay, now as time is passing and more answers, picture is changing indeed. So if I just check, we have now 20 answers. Anybody else would like to answer our poll? Still now possible to do so. So I'd say here, the overall picture, how people understand the situation of wind energy in their country is positive. Some still see a negative impact. Also, when we look at how the perception is of the global situation, majority, it's positive. I think that is in line with the presentations that we've heard. Yeah, I would end now the poll. Thank you, everyone, for taking part in the poll. Also, thank you, everyone, for taking part in our webinar. In particular, thank you very much to these excellent presentations to our speakers from the markets. As I mentioned before, this webinar is currently broadcasted live on YouTube. We will, after probably it takes 2-3 days, we will also put all those presentations online that people can later also watch them. We will continue next week with the second part of our half-year review with the main topic of Europe, MENA region, and also Africa. Yeah, with that, let me just say that thank you to those who are supporting us, those who would like to also support us, of course, in terms of if you would like to contribute, speaking of our webinars, contact us. If you like to support our work, join WWA. We're happy about all members that we have that help us to do the work we're doing. And of course, there's the opportunity of becoming a sponsor of these webinars, which we will certainly continue, not only 2020, but in the next year as well. And with this, let me hand back over for the final remarks and for closing our webinar to Peter Ray. Peter.
I've unmuted that came through. Did you hear that?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Thank you very much.
Please.
Yes. Well, what an encouraging what an encouraging session we've had. The position notwithstanding the disruption around the world by the pandemic, we have got progress taking place in so many parts of the world, and strong progress in relation to the wind industry and the renewable sector as a whole. Thank you very much for those who explained what's happening in their area, and I think I should say congratulations to those who are keeping the turbines turning and the blades in the air. We have an excellent industry of which we're proud, and thank you for all the proud contributions that have been made this evening. Thank you, Stefan and Jean, for organising and for managing the production, and farewell to you all. Thank you very much.
Have a nice day, have a nice evening, have a great time, and see you again maybe next week. Goodbye.